501. That means we have to get professional. We have to know what we're doing. We have to be fully prepared.
I don't know.
Hello and welcome once again to Crazy Comics and Stories. It's me, your charming and delightful old Uncle Rat Bastard. And at the other end of this series of tubes and wires that we call the internets is Joe, Crazy Writer. How you doing today, Joe?
Why aren't there any B-size batteries? Tell me. I gotta know so I can sleep tonight.
I don't know.
Ugh.
I don't know about things like that.
Fine. No sleep for me. Just like you.
No sleep till Brooklyn.
Nope. No sleep for you. Of course, here I am, once again, Cory is a victim of his own, how would you say it? Busyness? I wouldn't say circumstance because they're totally.
I would because it's
totally
I can do the curly. I'm a victim of circumstance. I'm trying to think, but nothing happens.
Just a victim.
That's my favorite.
But so here we are. What is our number now?
501.
Well, I gotta celebrate by having myself a victory pie. That's good.
And what kind of pie is it?
Blueberry.
Oh, okay.
Stopped by Walmart, and they always have those 50-cent pies.
Yes.
So I picked up a bunch.
They're not the best, but they are still pie.
Well, for 50 cents.
Yeah, for 50 cents, that's half the price of a Hostess pie. Although the last time I bought a Hostess pie, it was $1.29.
I actually saw some at Holiday the other day, all lined up. I was like, holy cow.
You know what's great about the Hostess pies?
Absolutely nothing.
Somebody like you could get all your carbs in one handful.
I get blood sugar just by looking at it. Oh, God, that was good. Not as good as a real blueberry, but, still pretty good.
Here's how out of it I've been lately, Joe. You know what started about a month ago and I completely forgot?
WandaVision.
No. Something I yell about every year that I absolutely adore, and it's the only time I ever go to the place that has it. Shamrock Shakes are here!
Bah.
I only go to McDonald's when they have Shamrock Shakes. And people say, well, do you like the Shamrock Shake? It's like, well, it tastes really chemically. But this year, they actually have the Shamrock Shake, except it's not a shake. It's more of a green mint chemical ice cream that they mix with Oreo pieces.
I think you should go to Arby's because they have those. What's that little mint thing? You always find them on pillows.
Oh, yeah. The Andre mints.
Yeah. And they actually make a malt or shake out of it, and it is good.
I leave those on people's pillows as a joke.
That's a good idea. Just leave them around, or leave them around the office.
Just leave them on a pillow with a little note that says, if you have a problem, please speak to the hotel manager.
Because no matter what, you're going to eat them.
Yeah. Did that at the group home once. I left everybody a mint on their pillow, and the staff were like, why are you doing that? And I said, well, I had a bunch of mints, and it's always nice to have a mint on your pillow. But that's not why we're here.
No.
We're here because I don't know what to call this, Joe. I don't know whether to call it Mythbusters. I don't know whether to call it If You Don't Know, Now You Know. I don't know whether to call it
We Know More Than You Do. We Know More Than You Do.
That's a good one. Or Cory Explains It All. Joe Explains It All. Neither
I
of
would
us are
go.
Clarissa, and we're explaining it all.
I would go with Cory explains it all because more than likely I'm just going to sit back and listen.
Oh, you'll know some of this stuff.
Maybe.
So these are questions that I have been reading on the internet that no one is getting right about comics and a few cases of toys.
Okay.
And I will bring up the one that got me started. That got me, actually, I wrote a whole long thing about it. And somebody said, but that's not what Stan Lee said. And I had to remind them that Stan Lee had the memory of a goldfish.
Yeah.
So there are people out there who still say to this day that when the X-Men were created, the idea was that Professor X was Martin Luther King and Magneto was Malcolm X.
No.
Well, Stan Lee in 2008, when there was an X-Men movie coming out, he talked about it that way. Joe, have you read the early X-Men comics?
I have.
What was Magneto like in those real early X-Men books?
Just a supervillain. It wasn't anything crazy. Not really ideologically driven, other than mutants good. I mean,
Humans
geez,
bad.
he called his group the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Evil people don't necessarily think of themselves as evil.
And if you read the real early X-Men stuff, it was more like Professor X had put together this school, and Magneto was just basically kind of an early Marvel villain. If you read the way he talked, it's not much different from the way Dr. Doom talked, or the Submariner talked, or the Terrible Tinkerer talked.
Or Pace Pot Pete.
Or the original Doctor Strange, who fought the Iron Man.
Or Dr. Droom.
No, Dr. Droom was a good guy. Dr. Droom, however, is the one who, when he got his powers, he was like, my eyes are becoming slanted, and I'm growing a mustache. I wonder why Marvel doesn't bring that up anymore.
I hate it when I grow a mustache.
Learning magic powers makes you grow a Fu Manchu mustache immediately. Oh my God, that means Hulk Hogan has magic powers. The other thing about Magneto was after the first few issues, he was not a big deal anymore. The Stranger carried him off to his planet, and then Magneto showed up a little while later, and Professor X basically got in touch with the Stranger, who was like, you escaped? Come on, you're coming back with me. And he wasn't used much after that.
No.
The Sentinels were kind of the only time, in the initial run, the only time there was the big anti-mutant stuff was when they did a Sentinel story. The rest of the time, the X-Men were just another group of superheroes. They were not hated and hunted by the world.
I mean, it was weird because they took a bus ride once, and everybody just ignore them. It's like, if they took off their uniforms, people wouldn't be looking at them like they're weird.
And really, those early X-Men stories, I can see why when they do the reprints, they pretty much start with the new X-Men. Because as much as I like Roy Thomas, boy, a lot of those early X-Men stories were, after Lee and Kirby left, they were so mundane. This month in the X-Men, they're going to go to a coffee house where Hank is there to listen to somebody read beatnik poetry. And even when the Sentinels showed up under Roy Thomas and Neil Adams, Magneto nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found. Wasn't even a part of that story. It was the story after where they went to the Savage Land and they found somebody there who turned out to be Magneto, and that was the big unveiling. But even then, it wasn't, I'm going to make it safe for mutants. It was more, I just hate people.
Yeah. And I make Angel wear a really ugly outfit.
Yes. So when the X-Men came back, Magneto wasn't even in the first year's worth of stories because in the Defenders, he had been turned into a baby to kind of write him out of the book.
Yeah.
And Eric the Red, who was our first look at the Shi'ar. That was Claremont's long story starting into it. The Shi'ar were coming, and one of the people involved was Eric the Red. Made him an adult again, and sort of de-aged him. That was something Marvel was doing to a lot of their characters in the 70s and early 80s, because they're like, oh crap, this stuff's been around for 20 years. Yeah, we better have the characters be de-aged, or we're going to be writing about people in their 80s fighting each other. And even then, he didn't start as, kind of this leader of the mutants. It was more, fuck the X-Men, I want to kill them. But Chris Claremont recently in an interview talked about why the Professor X as Martin Luther King Jr. and Magneto as Malcolm X didn't work, because first off, Professor X was a weaselly manipulative scumbag.
And that was his good points.
He faked his own death, didn't tell the rest of the X-Men, was usually manipulating them in some way. And Magneto was pretty much he had been a supervillain, and when Claremont took him over, he kind of became a terrorist. He was a mutant terrorist. And he said that he saw the journey of Magneto from terrorist to kind of working with the X-Men. He said the influence he was using was Menachem Begin, because Menachem Begin in the 40s was a Jewish terrorist who, by the time we get to the 80s, had won the Nobel Peace Prize. And he wanted to echo that through the stories. However, there were a couple of times when people at Marvel didn't like that, so they would do stories returning Magneto to being a villain. Mostly that X-Men Avengers story that Claremont had nothing to do with, where Magneto was put on trial, or a couple, other stories that other people did, where they were trying to short circuit what Claremont was doing, but they couldn't get Claremont to short circuit it because he was, the X-Men was making bajillions of dollars for Marvel at the time. But the Malcolm X, the first time they really pushed the Martin Luther King Jr. Malcolm X was the first X-Men movie, where the people putting the movie together pushed that narrative rather than people at Marvel pushing that narrative. So, and then 2008, Stan was a great publicity machine. He knew that that's what they were pushing for the movies, so that's what he sold them. So if you didn't know, now you know. Here's a question I have for Joe, because Joe knows the toys. We all know that Secret Wars #1 started as a toy tie-in. How did those toys do on the market when they came out?
I don't think they did that great, because they didn't last very long. There was like one line, and then the second line, I forget which toy it was, like an Electro and one other one that got released in South America. So they became super expensive, which usually means when a toy line gets dumped overseas, that means it didn't do well here. In some cases, it's very annoying, because if you remember the Dick Tracy movie that, who was it, Warren Beatty? No.
Yeah, Warren Beatty did.
Oh, yeah, that he did.
It was Warren Beatty and Madonna.
And the big reveal was that the villain of the movie, the Blank, was in fact Madonna. Now, they had problems before, because when you did that Batman the Animated Series, or what the hell did they call that? There was a Phantom something, and the toy revealed that it was the female protagonist was the villain, because they didn't, when you bought the toy, she wasn't wearing the mask. And it was like, well, that's stupid. You just gave away the big reveal in the toy.
Told you not to be stupid, you moron.
So what they did is they took all the Blank figures and they withheld them for the second wave. Well, the movie tanked. the toy line sucked, and so they released them all in Canada. I don't know why they just dumped these things overseas, and all the blank figures ended up going to Canada. And of course, when you had the blank figure, although it had the face on it, when you pulled the mask off or whatever you pulled off, it revealed that it was Madonna. Maybe it was on the back of the card. I'm just going to look up on the eBays here and see what these figures are even going for anymore. So yeah, generally the Secret Wars figure, the toy line didn't do so well. Yeah, let's see, blah, blah, blah.
Because I remember
there's actually none.
I couldn't find those toys anywhere.
No, I don't recall seeing them. I do recall picking up remainders at like Children's Palace, because Children's Palace, when it was around, was really good at picking up just remainder toys. They even had, like, the big one in the Star Trek Next Generation line everybody wanted was Troy, because in typical fashion, toy companies didn't really make women figures because they were under the illusion that the boys wouldn't play with female figures. But when you make the female figure such a predominantly part of the line, that's where when you had like the first Princess Leia figure in Star Wars, when the toy line came back, hard to find. Nobody had them. They weren't in the case. Troy, nowhere in the case. That's where you ended up finding, I think it was Children's Palace eventually had an entire end cap of Troy figures. So you could go in and buy as many of them as you want. And of course, this is years before the eBay's kids. So you just didn't do like I did, pop online and find the eBay figure. By the way, her figure is Breathless Mahoney, and you can find the figure itself with no mask running about $6.50. I could not. $6.50. Sorry.
Oh, I thought you meant $650. It's like,
no, I can't. There are
cats.
None. As far as I can tell, there are none that are the original blank figures. And again, this figure might be suspect because it's nothing like the 4-part articulation figures of the other figures. It's actually fairly voluptuous. So this may be something that somebody made up well after the movie. Let me just take a look as long as I'm hanging here. What was the other one? Electro. That was Marvel. Secret Wars. Electro. Constrictor, I think, was the other one. Again, only released overseas. Yeah, $309 if you found one, because they were never released here. That's the cheap one. They go upwards of $600 from beyond then. You see that sometimes in other lines, like the Superpower line, or what do you see? Yeah, Superpowers. They called their Superpowers. The later figures, when the line was over and they got scant release, those are the real expensive ones to find. And it happens even nowadays. There was a lot of hubbub about the fact there was no Black Widow figure in the Avenger line. And there was there were a shortage of Rey figures in the Star Wars lines. So yeah, the idea that, boys won't play with the girl figures, and then in the 80s and 90s, that got it so that when I would be out toy hunting, as soon as I saw a female figure, I'd pick it up. I still have that instinct to this day. I was out goofing around and I actually saw the, we call her Ghost Spider now or whatever, Spider-Gwen figure. And I was like, oh, the female figure rare. It's like, no, not really. Because eBay kind of equalizes things. So if you're looking for a female figure, you can find them. But yeah, I wasn't even aware it was a action figure line when I was buying Secret Wars, the comic series. And I ended up buying, I think there was that infamous Wisconsin Dells Con. If If you go back in the Solo Joes when I interviewed with Pat, some guy was just blowing them out super cheap, and I picked them up because at the time I was collecting action figures. And years later, when I had the shop, I brought them in and blew them out for silly money. So, yeah, those and some of those figures were pretty cool. They did some pretty good job with them, but no, as far as I can tell, I don't think the comic helped the toy line. And I don't even recall a comic shop even carrying them.
Well, back then, I don't think comic distributors carried toys.
No, certainly not the way they did when I had the shop. That was actually more of kind of a golden age of toys because you had figures being made of just the most obscure figures out there. And it was fun because you had just a whole variety of action figures. Even nowadays, I don't collect a lot of figures, but it's tough collecting figures now because you've really got two outlets, Target or Walmart. And usually...
And Amazon.
Well, somewhat Amazon, but even if Amazon has an exclusive figure, it sells out so fast you can't get it. You know, you got to run to the eBays, or even like in Minnesota, they have, well, in nationwide, they have the Toy Collector, which is a group of guys that get together, and when they see, hey, you looking for the Jar Jar Binks figure, which just came out for some reason, only 5 show up at Target. Well, if somebody wants them, they disappear. And I think I beefed about it, the Mandalorian figure that was an exclusive at Target sold out in 2 minutes online, and I have never seen them in the store. They weren't supposed to be available till like February 1st or something, and I have yet to actually see one. Occasionally somebody sees them, or the first person sees them buys them all. That's get ridiculous too, because sometimes Target will put out a set of toys that has a street date, and if you try to pick it up, the system will not allow you to buy it, even though they're sitting on the shelves, which I think is outrageous. But then again, you know, if you come back on the street date, you're never going to find them. So, yeah, it's tough being a toy collector now.
Now, when you first bought Hot Comics, was Cap City selling toys yet, or did that come later?
That had to have come later, because I look at my Cap City invoices, the few that I still have, and I don't recall any toys on them. Matter of fact, if anything, I recall buying toys. I think they started up when the X-Men show started, because I recall going to Target or like Toys R Us and buying, you know, figures and then bringing them back to the shop, because even when I bought them wholesale, I would pay what like Target and Toys R Us and Walmart were selling them for. Even nowadays, that's it. I mean, a lot of shops stopped carrying the Marvel Legend figures because they're just too expensive. Everybody wants the rare variant, but nobody wants to pay to buy a set. In fact, that was kind of the niche that I found myself in, and I've talked about it before. When McFarlane came out with Spawn toys, not only did he break the mold, we can thank him nowadays for $20 action figures, but he also tailored the assortment to where it was going. So if it was going to Target, there would be like maybe one female figure in it, because Target didn't want the female figures. They were under the idea that, well, boys ain't going to buy them. And for me, he would make sure I got 4 or 5 like Angela figures, because he knew the direct market would be able to sell them that way. And I actually had those figures coming from all sorts of different sources, because my niche was that I would guarantee if you bought the entire set, I would get you the set at regular price, because usually I marked up the female figures, or if you got a really insane like that Mills Bolgia figure, which Todd actually admit he lost money on. He just wanted to make it the way he wanted it. It was huge, it was heavy, it didn't hang on the peg hooks right. I think Toy Biz figures I would get through Diamond or Cap, and eventually we tied into, I think through Brent Moore in Comic Archives. He found a guy out in California that when the shipment would come in, he could get like a couple cases from him. We said, you got to call the guy before 11, because if you don't get it, if you get him after 11, he's drunk and he'll forget things. his attitude was, yeah, I'll sell them to you. Walmart doesn't care if they get 2-3 cases less than they ordered. They operate on a totally different scale than we do.
Now, when there was the Secret Wars line, but the one line I do remember seeing, even though the comic was, I'm a Kirby fan, but the comic was kind of iffy, was Superpowers.
Yeah.
And wasn't that more because it more tied into what they were doing with Super Friends, the cartoon, right?
Not really, because they had a lot of figures that weren't on the Super Friends. It was just concurrent. Super Friends ran so long. What they didn't realize is that even things like, Scooby-Doo is on forever. Yeah, but they ran like the same 20 episodes over and over. They weren't making new ones. They did the same thing with...
they would just make 6 new ones a year.
Yeah, and they would start at the beginning of the season. Or even things like, what was the first Sid and Marty Krofft? H.R. Puffin stuff. They just ran the same ones over and over. They didn't make new ones. There's very few episodes, only like 12 or 16 or something. But you think, oh yeah, it ran forever. No, it just kept doing it over and over.
I'm going to pull up the Star Trek animated series because I think that was a lot like that too. See, there were how many episodes? Oh, I like how this says, okay, there were 2 episodes, 2 seasons. Second season was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They only did 6 episodes for the new season. And in the first season, they did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Well, they did a lot more of that, but not. But that's what they would do in the 70s. If a show got renewed, they would only do just a few new episodes to kind of mix in.
Yeah.
And it got to the point with a lot of the animated, you talked about Scooby-Doo. I remember I always hated Scooby-Doo, but my sisters liked it. They would have, these are the new Scooby-Doo movies. And after about 2 months, it would be, they're just rerunning stuff. Well, because they knew the kids wanted to watch the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
And they also, at that time for TV animation, there really wasn't a call for half-hour animated TV in syndication. It wasn't like we're going to do 5 seasons of Hong Kong Phooey and then send that and it'll run in afternoons and stuff on local channels like they would do with a Gilligan's Island or a Bewitched or an I Dream of Jeannie. And I believe, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but the first syndicated cartoon was He-Man, in that they did 65 episodes for the first season, so that they had, I think it's, how many, is it that like either, I think that's 3 months worth of new episodes. And then they would run that 4 times a year. And for a lot of those, I know Disney often would do, okay, we've done 65 episodes, we're done with that, we're going to move on to something else, even if that show was doing well. Because I think Tiny Toons only had 65 episodes for a while. Animaniacs, they did more.
Yeah.
But a lot of them, once they got to 65 episodes, it's like, nope, that's enough, we're done.
Inspector Gadget actually premiered around the same time as He-Man. Same thing, 65 half-hour episodes.
So in your shop, what was the first big toy line that kind of came out of nowhere? Because I know by the time you had your shop, the X-Men had already started their toys.
See, it's hard to figure.
Had Star Wars started when you took over?
Yeah, Star Wars was already going.
Okay.
Star Wars.
Those are the 2 that I remember the shelves being the most full of.
I think Spawn? The ones that really took over big was when DC started doing their DC Direct line. And Marvel came about with Marvel Legends. These were toys initially that were only available at comic shops, so you had to come to me to get it. However, eventually they started showing up at other places like Toys R Us, occasionally at Walmart. And Diamond took some heat from that because they're like, well, we didn't say that they were comic store exclusives. We said we would only sell them to people who had an account with them. So somewhere along the line, somebody got an account with Walmart, and they would sell them the same toy I was selling, and somehow they got it for less. Because that was the same problem too. They're like, well, that's fine, but what I'm selling for $20, they're selling for 12, and I buy it at 12. It's the same old, song and dance over and over. So that had to have been, though, the bigger one, because there were so many different toy lines. I laugh about the Harry Carey figure because that was the first naked toy line where you could actually take off her top and she was naked underneath. There were a lot of, we did a lot of
Topless, topless.
We did a lot of manga figures, which were outrageous. Just the detail. I mean, they weren't so much to be played with. They were just miniature sculptures, and a lot of that we got through Diamond. Now the figures are, they're like $60 to $80. Back then they were selling any from 15 to 20, so they're a little bit more affordable. Those you would actually find at, if you remember, Suncoast Pictures in the malls, because I used to, back when you could buy DVDs and VHS, so you actually had specialty shops in the mall, and we had a number of people that were there. They would tell me whenever they were discounting the toys because I could go buy them cheap and then either keep them for myself or sell them. I'm trying to think of other Power Rangers. See, a lot of the times
I remember you going out buying those Power Ranger figures.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Pat was furious with you. Just, yeah. Pig biting mad.
Yeah, and the funny thing is I always told him that was the what Pat didn't understand. He bought a run of Vampirella, the original run of Vampirella, which you'd think would sell really well.
No.
But we didn't sell one. But at the same time, I bought a toy line like that. We could say it was Power Rangers, might have been Hot Wheels, I don't remember. But I sold them all. And even though I could point to that and say, Pat, you spent the same amount of money on this Vampirella run and it didn't sell any. I sold pretty much everything that I bought, because he just didn't understand the toys. I think eventually I just sold the Vampirellas to Joel Thingvall because I think he was I don't know if he was at Comic College or Nostalgia Zone or whatever they were before they split, because he could sell them, whereas I couldn't. And nowadays, of course,
at the time, Vampirella was very much a niche product, much like Creepy and Eerie. I think that was before they brought Vampirella back, because I think that was 94 when they brought her back. And Creepy and Eerie, even when they brought them back, nobody cared. I remember, and the people who buy those, it's a small group anyway. I remember when Brian had the shop. He was like Pat, and it's like, oh man, somebody brought in a whole bunch of Warren mags, and he bought them all up. And they sat, and they sat, and they sat, and they sat. And then Christy got the shop, and they sat, and they sat, and they sat. Finally, I told Christy, he bought them for this much. I'll pay you the exact same amount that he bought them for. She was like, sure, I want them out of here.
Yeah.
And I imagine, that if I were to take them to a shop, it would be the same thing. Whatever they pay me, they would just sit forever, because people who go into comic shops are different from people who are going to buy stuff online. And one of the things we talked about investing in our last episode, I always use the 25-year rule. When something is 25 years old, that's when the price starts to go up, because the person who was 11, 12, 15, up to 20 and couldn't afford it, or had it back then and had to sell it, or quit collecting or whatever, after about 25 years, you have a little extra money in your pocket, and you start to get that nostalgia thing where it's, I used to have those early issues of Spawn. I'd really like to have those again. Well, the people who bought Creepy and Eerie, by the time you got into the 80s, the market had shrunk. Nobody was buying them, but people who didn't buy comics. So you don't have the people who come back 25 years later and go, oh, yeah, I remember buying Creepy and Eerie off the newsstand. I ought to get those.
So what you're saying is Pogs should be making a comeback any day now.
I'm surprised. Well, I saw Pogs a couple of years ago, on that Facebook thing where you see your memories. There was a picture of a Pog set they had at Target. Yeah. And of course, hey, look, it's a set of Pogs. They're coming back. You, of course, had a bunch of jokes for that too. And I still remember anytime Pogs come up, all I can think about is the Pog fight that Butch and I had, where first we were flicking them at each other, then we just started grabbing handfuls out of the bucket and just throwing them at each other.
Well, that was the beauty of Pogs. It'd be guys who would come up to my doorstep and they'd just basically use a cardboard cutout or whatever, and we were selling Pogs to me at like $20 a bag load. The ones that I should have hung on to is like when DC had their Pogs or Spawn Pogs or things like that, because those are the ones that actually would have a value.
Yeah.
Matter of fact.
Or the Elf Pog.
Elf Pogs. He's making it. And of course, behold, the ultimate Pog. No, that was Steve Allen, wasn't it? No, I don't remember.
So here's another question that people get wrong out on the internets. Marvel versus DC was what killed the comic book market.
Oh, I don't think so.
Well, first off, it came out in 96. And Joe, when did the comic book market trip and hit its face? And
I don't know, 94, 95.
When was that the Death Mate?
That was, I thought, the end of 93.
Yeah.
Because it was supposed to be hot and then kind of died off. So things were already slowing down in 93. But Superman came back, what?
93?
Yeah, that same year.
Early in 93. Because you had the death of Superman. Then they had a month or two of, people dealing with the aftermath. Then the Superman books were canceled. Then they brought him back with Adventures of Superman 500, which that was the original Superman series when Byrne came in. Superman became Adventures of Superman so they could have a new Superman #1. Now they would just do a new Superman #1 no matter what.
Yeah.
But Adventures of Superman 500. And by Adventures of Superman 500, everybody was like, oh, this could be huge. And it wasn't.
Well, we sold it okay.
Yeah, but man, for years, when you had when you moved into the big store and Butch made the big shelves for comic boxes for back issue storage, I swear there were like 3 or 4 long boxes that were just those Superman titles from the Adventures of Superman 500 for like the next year. You could always get, Oh,
yeah, because every collection that came in had a run of Superman.
Yep.
And even when we sold, we still probably had 3 or 4 long boxes of that entire run. Not necessarily the leading up to the death. But,
no, that was a weird thing. Leading up to the death, Superman became red hot because the Byrne stuff everybody ordered and the stuff after Byrne nobody much cared about until they started the run up to Death of Superman. Because I remember the issue where Superman reveals his secret identity to Lois. Eventually, people were coming in for that. We could not get our hands on it anywhere. And it was shot up in price. I remember seeing it on your wall for like $20 or $25 at one point.
Oh, yeah.
Now, one of the books that they say killed the comic market, they will point to Turok, Son of Stone #1. I think that had a little to do with it because that was kind of the first book where the bloom was off the rose. It was ordered as being, a chromium cover.
Total chromium.
It showed up. It only had a part of it that was chromium. And it was really the first Valiant #1 since Wizard had hyped Valiant so much that Valiant was selling real well. And it came out and nobody wanted it.
See, now here's where I must have been an acronym. I can't even say the word.
Anachronism.
Anomaly. Because we sold all ours. And, I always laugh because, and I teased Tim about this at Granite City because, he bitched about, hey, this isn't chrome. And to placate the masses, they sent out this golden chrome Turok #1. And I was kind of like, hey, what the F? I sold mine the way I was supposed to. Every single bloody one of them, I got nothing. But these guys who bitched and cried, they ended up getting a reward for it. So, let's see, what is it? Turok #1 gold? Let's see if I can find it. It's probably... Gold! Somebody's got a 9.8 for... There's one for $20. So...
There you go!
$20.
For the gold!
And all it was a gold logo. And he was in gold. But, yeah, it was kind of weird because, like I said, we sold ours, all of them the way they were supposed to, and we got nothing. But, and I should have made it.
You got all the money for selling them.
Yeah, there was that. So I don't know if either I didn't order a lot or I just, I don't know. The only one I recall.
I think your shop was slow to react with the comics collapse because a lot of the comics collapse, in my opinion, were the kids who'd bought that Youngblood #1 or some of these other books, and it had been a year or two. And for us, a year or two for a comic like that is no big deal. Who cares? I have boxes of stuff that came out 3 years ago that I still go, oh yeah, these are new books I haven't had a chance to read yet. But if you're a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid and you buy your Youngblood #1 and you bring it back to the shop and I remember this is a $20 book, and the shop says, I'll give you a quarter for it.
If that.
And the kids would be like, well, these aren't an investment anymore. Boom.
Yeah. Mic drop.
And your investors moved on. Because one of the things working at Schindler's that I saw, when I started at Schindler's, it was 88, and you had these people knew nothing about baseball cards, knew nothing about baseball, didn't care, but they knew it was a collectible. And they knew that, a Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card's worth a lot, and this guy's worth a lot, and that guy's worth a lot. So you had these kind of, I don't want to say middle-aged, but guys in their 20s and 30s who saw this as a kind of a cheap stock market. And they came in, and they drove that market. I mean, there were people, they didn't know anything about baseball. They were buying these cards. And because it was such a hot market, you had all these other people who were like, yeah, I read in the paper that baseball cards are worth a lot of money. I can make money off these. And they would come in. And then the baseball strike hit.
Mm.
And all of a sudden, nobody gave a shit about baseball anymore.
And the sad thing is all these card stores had pre-ordered their product and couldn't cancel them.
Yeah. So here they've got tons and tons of new product coming in, and people had already moved on. And a lot of these people who look at collectibles as a stock market moved over to comic books because they were like, hey, I hear this X-Men #1 sold a lot of copies and it's worth money. And I hear this Spider-Man #1 sold a lot of copies and it's worth a lot of money. So if I buy the next book by these guys, it's going to be worth a lot of money. And to a lot of people say it culminated with the death of Superman, where you had all these people buying the death of Superman. And if you watch the old news stories on it, you've got the people in line who know nothing about comics. They're like, yep, buying this, and I'm going to put it aside, and it'll pay for my kids' college education. And people were buying cases of this shit. And then they go in 2-3 years later to sell it, and they get pennies on the dollar. Woof, they're on to something else. And I believe the next big thing that hit was Beanie Babies. Am I right?
Possibly. I wasn't big on them. But yeah, for a while there, Beanie Babies were real hot.
Beanie Babies were insane to the point where McDonald's had the Beanie Baby Happy Meals.
Oh, and people were breaking into stores that had Beanie Babies.
You would see mile-long lines of people to go to McDonald's to get the on Friday, because that's when they would change the toy in the Happy Meal. Oh. So you'd be driving along, and there you go. There's a line 2-3 miles long of people wanting to get that Happy Meal at McDonald's. I worked in an office building in downtown Minneapolis in the late 90s, and I think it was like Tuesday or Wednesday, they had like a little sundry store there. They'd have magazines, and they'd have candy, and they'd have soda, and they'd have snacks, and this. And he would get Beanie Babies either every Tuesday or Wednesday. And the ladies in the office knew what time the Beanie Babies would show up. So they would put in for their break to be 5 minutes before that. So they would be there downstairs ready and waiting when the Beanie Babies came in. But DC versus Marvel was more a reaction to, holy shit, the market has fallen apart. We got to do something.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I'd say the market had pretty much dropped, because you're thinking of books that would have killed it. And, Deathmate was a big one. Soups had collapsed. A lot of people. I mean, one time we had 300 subscribers for Superman, with a good 2/3 of them just Superman itself. They didn't get nothing else. They'd come in once a week or once a month, and most of them bailed once he returned. Trying to think of.
Now, for comparison's sake, how many X-Men subscribers did you have?
X-Men was always 100. That was always the guide we used, because there was always 100 people buying X-Men. I might order 200.
Superman in your shop was selling had 1/3 the subscribers of Superman.
Yeah.
Boy, DC'd kill for those numbers now, wouldn't they?
Oh, sure. I keep coming up with the idea of the Brotherhood, but that wasn't until 2001. Yeah. That was that mutant line, because I just remember by the time issue 6 came, nobody wanted it. It was written
by X,
which I guess is now known as Howard Mackey.
Yeah, it was Howard Mackey, because
that's outside the timeline.
He'd done so many comics that people didn't like that he felt, if they don't know I'm writing it, it'll sell better. It didn't.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, Howard Mackey, he's a pretty smart guy. You know why? On that story that Byrne did about Scarlet Witch going bad in West Coast Avengers,
mm-hmm.
He bought a lot of that art from John Byrne.
Mm-hmm.
And with that comic going for $300-400, imagine how much that original art is going for.
Oh, yeah. Byrne will come, he tricked me out of it.
No, Byrne has no problem with somebody buying his art, because he signed it, to my editor, Howard Mackey, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Any other stories that you have heard recently that you go, no, that's bullshit?
I can't think of anything. I know when we talked about doing this, I was trying to think of things, but the big one that I get is people loving that Stan Lee book that's coming out. I waited until I heard Roy Thomas's review from it, because I know you said that he was reviewed and interviewed for it. And Roy brings up a good point about that book. It's not that it's not well researched, but the guy makes a lot of supposes, and you do it by clever means. One would think that, or you could suppose that maybe Stan did this, or it comes to reason that. So he makes a lot of assumptions and conclusions, but he doesn't offer a lot of fact for that. And you get that a lot, even in just everyday talk with people. Well, studies have shown, which is a way of making it sound like you're an expert, but you don't have anything behind you. Again, simple Google search can do it. But it just sounds like this guy wrote this book, just to, I don't know, maybe Stan pissed on his puppy or something, because.
Well, there's always going to be. Now, I have not read the book, but when it comes to celebrities, there's always money in what is their dark side. I mean, that's once the Inquirer put away the Elvis stories and the stuff like that. By the time they got to the 80s, their whole gimmick was that look at these celebrities, look at the horrible things they do, look at how bad they are, look at who has a terrible body on the beach, look at who's let themselves go, look at who's on drugs. There is that thing where people they want the bad news about celebrities so that they can say, oh, well, they may be rich and famous, but their lives aren't any better than mine. And we've talked over and over and over and over about Stan. But the thing that got me, because John Camino, who kind of is Roy Thomas's agent, Roy doesn't have a Facebook, but if you are on the Roy Thomas Appreciation Society, it's run by John, who talks with Roy every day. So if you ask a question on there, he'll say, well, I asked Roy Thomas and Roy said this. He said the one thing that really pissed Roy off was he's got all of these text messages from the guy who wrote it, where he's bragging about the fact that the publisher won't pay for a fact checker, and he's certainly not going to pay for a fact checker, and they name a fact checker in the book. But he's got all these text messages from the author saying, yeah, we didn't fact check anything. We don't have to because the legal department says if you use enough weasel words, you can say, well, that's what I heard, or here's the one that Fox News uses. And whenever you hear this, you know that it's bullshit. Whenever you hear a reporter say, some people say, what it is, they want to get a rumor and shove it in so that now that rumor is considered a fact, even though they have nothing to back it up. It's a weasel way to get it in so that if you are sued for libel or slander, you can say, I didn't say that. I don't have a source. I had just heard it. So some people say this. I was asking for a reaction to what other people are saying. So, and any time you tell the story of Stan Lee, you have to tell the story of Martin Goodman, because Stan Lee was an employee for Martin Goodman. It would be like telling the story of, I'm trying to think of it. It would be like telling the story of Tobe Hooper on the making of Poltergeist without talking about the fact that Steven Spielberg was the executive producer who was there every day of the shoot. So you've got the guy who did Texas Chainsaw Massacre doing his first big budget movie. Well, yeah, and Steven Spielberg was there every day, kind of overseeing it. So that's why when you watch Poltergeist, it was directed by Tobe Hooper, but if you told me it was directed by Steven Spielberg and showed me other Steven Spielberg movies, stylistically, they're exactly the same. Martin Goodman said, these are the things we do. He would actually come down and go, all right, Westerns are selling. You're going to cancel these 3 books and create 3 Westerns. Or even further back before the collapse of Atlas News, it would be a phone call that says, romance books are selling. We need 20 on the stands by the end of the year. Horror books are selling. I want 15 of them. And Stan would do it when it was his job. Or when they had, this is a story I think tells more about Stan and Atlas, Timely, Marvel than any other story. In the 40s, they went from contracting studios like the Simon and Kirby studio and the Alex Schoenberg studio and the all these studios who would create stuff. And then after the war, they had brought it all in-house because they wanted more control over things. So they had a bullpen. They had rows of drawing tables, and people would draw, and then they would take it over to the inkers, and the inkers would ink, and they would take it over to the letterers, and it was a full-time job. And when you got done with the job, Stan would give you another script, whether it was one of his or one of the other people who wrote it, or something from Al Fago, who was the editor on the funny animal stuff and a lot of the more kid-friendly stuff. Stan did more of the stuff that was aimed at older readers. And once the story was done, it was okay. It's job number, blah, blah, blah. So when you read your old marbles and you see on the splash page stuff like X0154, that was the job number. So that story was X0154. The next story that was drawn was X0155, 0156, etc., which is a way that some of the historians have been able to tell when these books were done. And, okay, we have a romance story. We don't know what book it's going to be in yet. All the romance books are full. We'll put it in the closet, save it for later. We got a crime story. Put it in the closet, save it for later. Boom, boom, boom. One day in 1949, Martin Goodman came down and found the closet and saw that there was tons of art and story in there. And he told Stan, we have enough art and story in there to publish for the next 6 months. Fire everybody. And Stan had to sit in his office all day, bringing in people one at a time and firing them and telling them that, once we use up all the art in the closet, we may bring you back. What Stan didn't know was they would never bring anybody back. It would all be freelance after that. Every time it came up in the serious interviews, Stan, Doc Vassaleros talked about it. Other people have talked about it. Will Murray talked about it. Anytime that comes up, Stan cries. This is something that happened in 1949. Stan would cry that he had to take away the living, the feeding your family. He would have to take that away from everyone who worked for him because the boss said they're done.
What was the name of the artist that died?
Joe Maneely.
Yeah, there's a story in that Stan Lee book where one person is quoted as saying, "Well, Stan overworked him so much he ended up having his accident and killing himself." And I'm like, where in living hell did that come from?
Not from
one person. One person
about.
Said it. Yet this guy's making an entire. That to me alone says that if you're giving this guy your money on this book, you're just a Stan hater. I'm not saying I wouldn't pick this book up off a remainder rack, but I'll give you an example. I picked up a book once, and it was a book on John Lennon. And as I'm reading this, it says things like, John basically, he tricked Linda McCartney into having sex with him and all this bad stuff, how he was such a bastard. And I'm not sugarcoating John Lennon, but I think I asked you about this book. I said, I'm starting to read this book, and it's like, this is crazy stuff I've never read. Well, it's based on an alleged diary of John Lennon that for some reason, this guy got a hold of that no one else seems to know exist and claims all these bad things about John. Much like what we're talking in the Stan Lee book. This guy just wrote this book bashing John Lennon, and he's legally protected because he's like, well, here's the diary. I don't know if it's legit or not, but it was sold to him. It was legit. I promptly took that book, and I think I left it somewhere like in a free reading library. I didn't bother finishing it because this is based on some type of weird fantasy that this guy is conducting off of alleged diary that may, or more than likely, is just not true.
And another book like that, Bob Woodward's book Wired about John Belushi. Everybody knew John Belushi did a lot of drugs, but everyone who knew John was like, they got this wrong, 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 they got this wrong. Dan Aykroyd pointed out all of the things that were wrong, and Dan Aykroyd has never sugarcoated stuff about John Belushi. Talked about how Belushi was belligerent, how he was abusive, how there were times he was just terrible to work with, and how they would be making a movie and John would be on a bender and one of the big costs of the Blues Brothers was, well, we can't film today. Why? John can't do anything. And with Stan Lee, a lot of the decisions he made after his lifetime contract at Marvel were up were terrible. He fell in with a lot of scammy people. And I think a lot of that is because for all of Stan's work with Marvel and his savvy with that, he had worked for one company his whole life. And he was unbelievably trusting. If the stories I've heard about when he got involved with Stan Lee Media, or I forget the name of the other one, these two companies where they ended up being like scammy pyramid schemes. Stan was just too trusting. It's like, oh, well, this guy seems like a good guy. The people around him seem like good people. Cool, let's get to work. And even toward the end, I haven't read the book, but Stan's wife and daughter saw him as this ATM that they could just get tons of money out of. And if half the stuff I've read from people who knew Stan about his daughter are true, it's good that they were able to get him out of her clutches the last few years of his life. Because one of the saddest parts of Stan Lee's life were the last few years when you would see pictures of him at a convention and he would look completely out of it, signing stuff. And he didn't know where he was half the time. The guy was in his 90s, and he was doing conventions, 2 or 3 conventions a month. And once they were able to get in and get those people away from him, and he was able to just be home, he did much better. Roy Thomas talks a lot about that. But there's always going to be money, and you see how terrible this person is?
On the plus side,
who knows, if I ever get famous, maybe there'll be a book about how terrible I am.
No, it'll
Cory
never.
Didn't really clean his house.
It'll never
did
happen.
Dishes. He just threw them away.
It'll never happen. For crap's sakes, we don't even have a Wikipedia page. Nobody's going to care about us.
Nobody's going to care about us right now, except who does care about us, Joe?
Mr. Potato, now that he's got his penis back?
These guys, our sponsors.
Oh, I should have guessed.
Believe it or not, kids, this here podcast has sponsors. And that sponsor, since day one, is DreamHost.com. DreamHost.com is the best, bar none, web host in the whole known universe. And if you need a website, head on over to DreamHost.com, put in code CRAYZ, that's KRAYZ, and get $20 off your first year. Now, if you would like to advertise here on any of the Solitaire Rose Network podcasts, you can. Just email me at solitairerosenetwork@gmail.com, subject advertising. Also, head on over to eBay and look for user Krayz, Krayz. That's Joe Crazy Writer, who's always telling us about the eBay in every episode of Crazy Comics and Stories. If you would like to contact us, you can do so. You can give us a call at 952-856-0519. Leave a message and we'll play it on the show. Or you can send us an email at solitairerosenetwork@gmail.com. Thanks. And I got an email from a longtime listener.
Cool.
Basically, after I pointed out how many hours I'd worked last week, and the fact that the podcast was 3 hours long. And he sent me a quick email that said, I have no idea how you are still standing at the end of every week. Not only am I still standing, I'm doing other podcasts like these. The Solitaire Rose Radio Network is currently on a pause basically because COVID-19 has made it so that I have to work a lot of extra hours at both jobs. But you can still go and listen to my other podcasts. Now, you're probably listening to Crazy Comics and Stories, which is the main podcast. But on this same feed, KRAYZCOMIX, is Solitaire Rose Radio, the solo radio podcast that I do. I've done interviews, I've done short stories, I've done all sorts of things, and you can get to it right here on this same feed. I also do a podcast called Novelcast, where I take the novels I've written and turn them into free audiobooks. That's over at novels.solitairerose.com. Dangerous Dan Moore and I, and of course Wolfie B. Bad, give you bad advice over at badadvice.solitairerose.com. You send in your questions, and we give you the aforementioned bad advice. And then myself and Adam Vermillion from For the Love of Comics do the Fantastic Forecast at fantasticforecast.solitairerose.com, where we go through the issues of the Fantastic Four, 4 issues at a time, to give the plot and commentary on each issue. That's not all. Yes, I'm crazy. I still, over at pwinsiderelite.com, every week on Wednesday, do a recap of the latest episode of AEW Dynamite. I write up what happened, and then myself and Anthony Pyrus will do an audio. Now, you can only listen to the audio, if you remember, at pwinsiderelite.com, and if you're a wrestling fan, you should be, where we then break down the episode, talk about what we liked, what we didn't like, give it a grade, and let you know if you should have watched that episode. Those are the other podcasts here at the Solitaire Rose Radio Network. Thanks. And now we get to Joe's favorite part of the show.
Intervention.
No, not where I read the two-page text pieces from old comics of the 40s so they could get the second class mail rating.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
No, it's Joe. What's going on the eBays?
All sorts of fun stuff. Matter of fact, I spent most of today putting up variant covers because I had found a box that had been shoveled in the bottom of my basement. What I'm doing actually is I'm looking because I can't find my box of comics that are the comics that I would keep forever. And I've been tearing my house apart trying to figure out where these comics are. They're in the house. I just don't know where. So as I uncover good stuff, I turn around and I just pop it on the eBays. And as usual, some of it sells. For example, in 1989, Marvel, you're going to be shocked at this, Cory, reprinted Hulk 180, 181. I am just going to give you the dime because I'm not going to even insult you with an Ask the Strode. Because as we all know, that was the first appearance of Wolverine, and he battles the Hulk in those 2 issues.
Who was the villain, Joe?
Wendigo! And Wolverine, actually.
I remember going back and reading that story, and it's funny how they had to they would go right up to the legend of the Wendigo, but because of the comics code, they couldn't say, well, what happens is if a human eats another human, they become cursed to become the Wendigo. No, they just kind of go up and then go around that so that they don't have to put any of the detail in.
Yeah. So, but I must have picked this up at one of our dollar bin binges because, as if I haven't read enough of them. I did sell off a Vengeance of Vampirilla number 25. This was back in 96 when Harris was publishing it, or her, or whatever. But this one had a red foil cover. Ooh, red foil. I didn't think much of issue number 1. This is it Chi or Chai?
Shang-Chi,
the recent series from Marvel. So I didn't buy the rest of the series, so I sold off my number 1. Somebody got it at a good deal. Richie Riches from 1977. I have no idea how many Richie Rich comics there are. This was just one of those I picked up, read it, enjoyed it, sold it. Cable Virgin variant cover that I think Javier Rodriguez did. This is out of volume 4. Life with Archie, another a bunch of series that seemed that, how many different Archie books could you have? Well, in 1977 lots. 2021? Anyways, Fantastic Four number 400. Again, foil. Lots of foil covers back in those 1995.
Oh, I remember the run up to that. They would do a foil cover every 3 months.
Oh, yeah. They had like a red one for Johnny Storm, and I think there was a white one. And this one I just picked up. I think this was when we were back at the was it Free Comic Book Day, and we stopped at that outdoor show.
Oh, yeah.
So I just picked it up because I have no idea if I have it or not. And after reading it, I understand why I don't. Savage Hulk 1 through 4 from 2014. I talked about this back. I read it. It was Hulk versus Silver Age X-Men. The whole Savage Hulk series, I think, from 2014 only went to, I think, issue 6 or 7. This story I was less impressed with. So on eBay's it went. Still blowing out Dynamite magazines. Number 68, which had Robin Williams on the cover. Number 70, which had Gilda Radner. And number 11, actually I should say 48, is from 1978, had Shields and Yarnell. Cory, tell them what Shields and Yarnell, who they were.
Shields and Yarnell were a pair of mimes, wife and husband, who somehow became famous enough to get their own TV show. And let me see. I want to get the name of the Shields and Yarnell. And literally, they were just a pair of mimes. And they got a TV show in 1977. And I need to check here. Robert Shields is my third cousin.
Ooh.
Shields and Yarnell have separated.
Yeah, the last I recall is Yarnell being in Spaceballs as Joan Rivers did the voice of the robot. I don't know what the name of the robot was.
Let's see here. I can't actually pull it up. That was her last movie appearance. However, Joe, did you know that she was in the Mac Davis show?
I don't even know what the Mac Davis show is.
Mac Davis had a show. Her first appearance in a movie was in 1963. She was one of the dancers in Bye Bye Birdie.
Ooh. My wife was in Bye Bye Birdie, the play, back in high school.
They came to fame when they were on the Sonny and Cher show.
As most people would.
Here was the thing about the Sonny and Cher show. It was huge. Then they got a divorce.
And it was huger.
Well, what it was, the show was canceled because they couldn't get along. But the ratings had been so good that CBS came to them and said, hey, can you guys still do your show? Well, we're divorced. Well, yeah, you know how you used to, make fun of each other for the comedy bits. The show's ratings were so good, we desperately need it back. So they brought it back. And I wonder how many seasons it lasted after they brought it back.
I don't know. I do remember
it only lasted one season after they brought it back.
The snark was almost too much.
Yeah.
But I do remember afterwards, because Sony Bono went on to do the Sony Bono Variety Hour, which sank, and then Cher did her own show called Cher, which actually lasted a bit. It was back in the 70s when you had the variety shows. Everybody had a variety show. My favorite was, of course, Friday Night, Donnie and Marie.
We have variety shows now, except now they're all competitions.
Yeah.
Because they're the same thing. This guy's going to sing, and this person's going to dance, and this person's
You know what destroyed variety shows?
The fact that they didn't have Sid and Marty Krofft put them together anymore?
Well, the Star Wars Holiday Special.
No, because after that was the worst variety show ever made.
Pink,
Lady and Jeff.
No, I want to go with that because
written and showrun by Mark Evanier.
Oh, Mark.
Did you know that, Joe?
I did not.
Oh, he is one of the things he used to do in his comics. he would have essays. You know, if you picked up DNA Agents or Crossfire or Hollywood Superstars, he would have an essay in the back. That's where the News from Me started, because after those books were canceled, he moved the essays into the Comic Buyer's Guide, and now they're out on the internet. But he used to write about, you know, working on variety shows and how Pink Lady and Jeff, they would have to teach them their lines phonetically because neither one of them understood English in any way, shape, or form.
That's the makings of a good show.
I agree.
All I can say is we could start the Star Wars rumor, so then when we do episode 1001, we have something to talk about. All these fake rumors that started from our little podcast. See, I'm thinking of the future. Let's see. Let me round out what I sold on eBay this week because it was busy. Awesome Universe Handbook #1, which was a black and white variant back when Alan Moore had control of the Awesome Universe. Cory, did you ever read Mez in Scena?
I don't think so, no.
Yeah, it was a one-shot from Vertigo in 1997 from Christopher Fowler and John Bolton. Just reading this off Atomic Avenue. Walk along any city street and you encounter them. Men with staring eyes and women who talk to themselves. They are the insane, and their minds have shifted elsewhere to the chameleon-like landscape of the mental plane. The ride is parallel reality where the minds of the mentally fractured. Not terribly expensive, but for some reason I had a bunch of promo postcards and put them all together and sold them as a batch. A local listener, Mike, bought Wonder Woman 1 through 9 off the DC New 52 from me. So I must have been back when I was reading it, and then I've issue 9, and I was like, oh, that's it, I'm out of here. Cory, what do Nova 12 and Amazing Spider-Man 171 have in common from 1977?
It is a crossover, but here's the thing you may not know about the crossover. Joe, let's see, who wrote the first part? I think it was Marv Wolfman wrote the first part, which was in Nova, and the second part was in Spider-Man.
Yep.
Marv Wolfman did not tell Len Wein the solution to the mystery.
Yep.
And Wein actually picked out a different murderer, but Marv Wolfman will never, he said he will never tell us who the murderer was that he put clues in. It's that Len saw the clue that gives away the murderer and read it differently than what it was intended.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
All I remember my first Spidey was 178. So as I'm backtracking, I ran across part 1 side by side with Nova, and then I had to go find issue 12 because this was a crossover between one book to another book, the way they were wont to do. And that was my introduction to Nova. This was actually their first meeting. So kind of a fun little series. Let's see, other goodies sold. Well, I actually sold some non-comic stuff. I sold this electric.
Are you allowed to do that?
I can sell whatever I can get my greedy little hands on, which is why at the airport when I'm telling people, don't leave nothing behind, because if you do, I get to put it on eBay. Not really. I don't want to say that because people believe me. In 1960, I found that, well, I didn't find it in 60s, but it was from the 60s, an electric cable car. It was battery operated. You strung it on a string and it would bounce back and forth and had lights in the front and inside it. I bought it from someone who said it worked, but I never did anything with it. So I just, brand new ones were pricing upwards of $100. Since mine was open and not really mint, some guy made an offer like I tell people to do, and they done bought it. I sold, well, I told you about the postcards I sold, but I sold a Spawn 2-pocket folder, kind of like the folders you used to use when you went to school. This was actually picked up, one of the goodies I bought when Al Simmons came to town and went to the con as Spawn / Al Simmons, and he just had a bunch of things with Spawn on it because they didn't have anything else Spawn to sell. The coolest thing I bought from him, of course, was the Hot Wheels Spawn car that didn't have the bats on the hood, because they ran about, I think, was it 1,000 or 10,000 of them? And Todd saw it and said, no, put the bats on it. So it created a rarer variant, which is why the Spawnmobile you can find for $10, and this without the bats on the hood, you are a little tougher, sometimes upwards of $100. Remember those little green army men, Cory?
Yes.
If you had a plastic green army truck, which I had, I sold mine for like $25 because all those little, I thought stuff is going crazy because, kids beat the shit out of this stuff and mommy threw it away. So if you have one in semi-decent shape, I was able to get something out of it. But the most shocking thing I sold, I talked about how I was surprised in my Kickstarter, how I got a Hell Witch, the Forsaken #1 Black Metal Edition with only 13 of them made. It's actually a comic book with metal covers, and it comes with a metal certificate of authenticity that says that they're limited to the 13 serial number copies and 5 artist proof editions. Never seen an artist proof edition. I was shocked that I actually got one of these, and it was so cool, and I hung on to it, and I was like, didn't make the cut, so I popped it up on eBay, sold hours later, because only 10 of these were actually released by Coffin, because they kept 3 for themselves. Only 3 of them have been on eBay. Ironically, I had number 12, number 13 sold, and I saw the results for number 11. And boy, this thing, well, what the heck? I sold it for $500. I was just like, wow. And the guy who got it was happy. I emailed him because PayPal or eBay or somebody kind of blocked the payment because I haven't had, and I'm doing a lot of business, but all of a sudden a $500 came through and they're like, we're going to hold on this. And I'm like, why? So I just emailed the guy and said, hey, they put a hold on it. Well, they released it the very next day, which was nice. And I priority mailed it to him, and he sent me feedback that he enjoyed it. And I'm so glad it went to someone who at least appreciates it, because he was like, I never thought I'd pay this money for a comic, but it's really cool. And, I'm sure one of these days I'll look back and go, but I do that with pretty much everything I sell on eBay. So if you want to see some of the things I put up on eBay, you want to hear me on this very podcast go, you know what to do. KRAYZ, come get some.
And now we get to my favorite part of the show. No. Not where I pin up all the future state covers and see what happens to them when I put a black light on them. Ooh, trippy. No, it's Freaking and Geeking. Joe, what are you freaking on?
I had down work, but I can't remember why I was freaking about it. See, what happened was we were going to originally record this on Sunday, but somebody who will remain nameless, Cory, Body decided, you know what, you've been running me ragged for a long time, and I'm just going to pass out. So not only was I up at 8 o'clock, which I get up anyway, so I'm not blaming Cory for that. But we figured, let's record at 11. So at 11, I was waiting. And now what happens is I'm not waiting, I'm doing stuff. Because I know the worst thing that could happen is, I'll get into my second freaking. That Saturday night to Sunday was weird weather. Minnesota weather. I went to work and it was 40 degrees. It was sunny. Things were melting. We were under a winter storm advisory. What that means is a winter storm was coming through. They thought it would start at 9 o'clock. It was going to dump 2 to 4 inches of snow, and it would be gone by 6 o'clock. And I was working Saturday night, so I was a little concerned, but I got my 4-wheel drive ready to crank. I'm ready to crank home in case it happens. Well, they kept moving it back. And by the time I left work at 10 o'clock, closer to 10:30, it was like on our doorstep. I got home and went to bed, woke up, and we had about 3 inches of snow, maybe 4. I didn't go outside and measure, but I had a couple hours before I had the podcast, so I do what I don't get to do a lot. I get to sit down and pour myself a Diet Mountain Dew, munch on some donuts, and just look outside and watch it snow, which was kind of fun. And I'm kind of glad. I almost went in for overtime because I know they're busy. I know we're constantly running crazy because we're on the edge of spring break. Not quite there yet, but people who can do it are taking their early spring break vacation now, judging by the amount of families coming through. And of course, I'm thinking poor Cory, who's probably getting off work about now, is going to have to drive home in this crap. And we all know how much fun Cory loves driving in snowstorms. But snow tapered off. By noon, it was gone. And by that time, I think Cory sent me a message saying, I fell asleep. Well, I'd already made plans to go to Target with Chris and get things going. Because like I said, I did, in case something happens, God forbid, Cory, you end up in a ditch somewhere during a freaking snowstorm. But I never know if, like, I got to stay late because the next person didn't show up or.
Which actually happened that morning.
Yeah. And, so
It was only 20 minutes, but still.
Yeah. And so I'm always waiting. Well, I didn't realize he was just going to fall asleep for the afternoon. I don't think you did either, come to think of it.
No.
I don't want to go into your story. But anyways, later that afternoon, he just kind of, he just said, I'm just not feeling good. Okay, we'll record Monday. Monday, I bailed because my mom and dad were in freak mode because they were going to get their second COVID shot and didn't have a shield. I mean, I'm talking like a plastic shield in front of their face. So my wife apparently ordered them and they arrived Monday, so we ran out, and which is fine. It was nice to sit down, and we had a good 2-hour sit-down visit, which, years from now, I'm going to cherish that I actually got to do that. So here we are Tuesday potting. So that was kind of the that might have been why I was freaking at work too, but it was just weird because, I forgot to say, later that Sunday, bright, sunny. I mean, by noon, it was blue skies and sunny. The snowstorm was gone. It started melting. It was only in the 20s, mid-20s, but today it's in the 40s and everything's melting. So, yeah, it was just like a quick melting. It's like one side of my truck when I went out to use it, and I'll tell you why I was out in my truck in a minute, was melted and all gone. And the other side, it was icicles and the window was frozen shut. So basically, I just turned the truck around, and in about 5-10 minutes, all that was melted. It was just one of those type of days. Usually when we do previews, we're always talking about, Boundless and Avatar. They've always got these editions that they're selling, the naked, nude, rare one, or things like that. Only 50 made. Well, I've discovered something interesting. There is somebody on eBay who apparently must be just ordering all 50 of these things because he's selling these same things that are in previews while they haven't been ordered yet. And so I think what he's doing is he probably ordered all 50 of them thinking I will get probably 10 of them, but he's selling them as if he has 50 of them ready to sell. Which is interesting because a lot of times when these editions, it's like a nude, rare, leather-bound, naked cover of whoever. There are only 50 of them made. And he said, I got 50 for sale. I'm like, how the hell did you do that? But what's happening now is when I go to order 1 or 2 of them, I'm not getting it because Diamond's allocating them, and I don't know if they're allocating them to this guy or whatever. So basically, when you see it in the previews catalog, you probably aren't going to get it. On the plus side, this guy's selling them on the eBays for the same price you could have bought them out of the previews catalog. So go figure. It's a weird niche that this guy must be working for this guy because every single limited book that previews is advertising from Avatar and Boundless, not the hardcover books, but like the nude limited edition variant or the Lady Death bend over her leg backward, chest out, cut in edition. He's got all of them on eBay he's selling 50 copies, which is amazing because previews is selling that they only have 50 copies made. I'm like, whatever. Buyer beware. Do what you want. Like I said, I was a little bummed because all of a sudden the editions that I ordered for myself were all canceled. Allocated by Diamond, which I bitched about previously. Why was I out driving my truck? Well, I had to go get my teeth checked out. And I swear, I don't know if I've talked about this before. I got a crown in, and as they're poking around my tooth, you could go back to were we podcasting when I was in Washington D.C. for 7 months?
No, we were not.
Okay, so pre that, but what happened was before we started podcasting, and when I was still on the road for TSA, I was in DC for 7 months, and I actually ended up with a pain in one of my teeth, but it only hurt when I bit down on stuff. So I basically chewed on the other side. When I got back, the dentist discovered, oh, you got a crack in your tooth. And so what happened was he ended up filling it, and then a couple of years later, it cracked again, but the whole side came out, and he put another filling on it. Well, that particular tooth, the filling's loose again. And because so much of the tooth rotted away, not my fault, and I'll bitch about this in a second, he's like, oh, we're going to need to put another crown on that. Oh, and then over on this side where you're feeling those slight pains, yeah, there's another crack there. It may be, I'm going to have to remove the filling and look. It may be something I can fix. It may be something we can put a crown on. I may have to do a root canal. I'm like, crowns aren't cheap. They're like about $2,000, $2,800. And I've already got one that we just paid off. And Chris just had one done. And her problem is hers keeps falling out of her mouth because they didn't use permanent cement on it because they wanted to see how it would fit. Well, not fitting too well, Mr. Dentist, because it's falling out of her mouth. And unlike mine, hers has an exposed nerve. So she's going to spend the next 48 hours in pain until she can get back to the dentist to get it done. The freaking on this is, okay, I've generally been really good with dental health care. I brush my teeth once or twice a day. Cory, remember when we were kids, you used to chew on those red tablets to show you where you missed? Because the red would stain the plaque and you had to go back. I did that. I floss. I did everything. My teeth are rotting out of my head because of one simple reason. Back then, you take a tooth. Let's imagine the cavity. Okay, take a dice. Okay, that's your tooth. See that little one spot? That's your cavity. Well, what they did is they would hollow out the entire tooth and fill it. That's how they got rid of cavities back then. Nowadays, they can zoom in and say, okay, you got a little cavity. There, we got rid of it. It doesn't need to be filled. Well, the problem is now here I am. Now, this was done in my teens. So here I am 40, 50 years later. The teeth are weak, structurally unsound, and they're just going to fall apart. Every fucking tooth in my head has a cavity in it, except the biters up front. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4. That's like 20 teeth I'm looking forward to getting crowns for in the next decade or so. What a bunch of bullshit. I mean, I did what I was supposed to do, and I'm still fucked. So, yeah, I'm freaking on that. You want to know why I'm selling my good stuff? Well, actually, no, I had nothing to do with it. I just bit the bullet and decided not to. But I will be selling stuff because, as you know, most healthcare doesn't cover dental work. So, it's out-of-pocket type expense. Even with dental insurance, it was still like $2,000, which means they covered quite a bit, but whatever. So, yeah, I'm a little freaking on that. You can still do the right stuff, everything you're supposed to, and still get screwed. How about you, Cory? What's got you freaking?
There were a lot of comic shops that only got their DC books last week.
Because
Diamond had shipping delays because of all the weather problems. They also were shutting down a warehouse in Virginia. And I don't know, they didn't give a reason why, but I know when other book shipping companies have moved to like Virginia or Tennessee or places like that, they're not able to get enough good employees to handle books.
What people don't realize is they're not, it's the good employees, but they want these guys to work Friday, Saturday, Sunday, pulling the books so they can ship them Monday.
Yeah.
At that age, at that wage, are you really going to give up your weekends for this?
And one of the things that helps in other areas, comic shops are like this. Comic shops, nobody works at a comic shop thinking, man, I'm going to get rich. People work at a comic shop because they love comic shops, same as bookstores. People work in bookstores because they love books. If you go up to the employees at your local Barnes & Noble and ask them why they're working there, they will all say the same thing, the discount. But there were a lot of shops who got their books late. There are a lot of shops who didn't get their books till this week. Even DCBS, who is a distributor of DC, didn't get any Marvel or anything from Diamond until the weekend. So because of weather and some other logistical things, comics were late. And then I look at what DC has, and we're going to be going over DC stuff, and their publishing is a goddamn mess. Their trade paperbacks, it's, there are all these books that they didn't do trade paperbacks on, but the Future State, oh, here we go, got all the Future State books right here. There were only 2 issues of that. Don't care, here's the trade paperback of it. I don't get it. I don't get it. It wears me out. It wears me out. Joe, what are you geeking on?
Geeking. Let's see. I gotta go back to eBay. I'm shocked, I tell you. Because when I'm bored, I must be really bored because I am buying lots of eBay stuff. So let me find what I have purchased. Dun dun dun. Let's see. I got a Supergirl sketch by actor Aaron Lee Johnson. As far as I know, he's a guy out of Chicago. He's doing it for charity. It's not the Supergirl style I want, but I just figured I didn't pay a lot for it. I just for charity I buy stupid things. I did buy a Supergirl 9x12 original art comic, sexy pinup from someone A. Taraves, who works for the Ed Benes studio. Ed, of course, works everything, Marvel, DC, whatever. It's pretty nice. It's got her in a bathing type suit, which is sort of the type I buy. It's just one of those that after I'd seen the way he drew the face, I thought, yeah, this is kind of neat. I picked up a comics interview number 75. Do you know why, Cory?
Why is that?
Well, not because Howard Chaykin's in it, which is a good reason. But apparently Joel Fingball, one of our friends locally, is featured on it. We were talking about Joel. Yes, they do
an interview with him about the comic convention scene in Minnesota, where he goes into why he quit running the comic convention here.
And it's 1989, so I figured, what the heck? I'll get it, and next time I see Joel, have him sign it. I've been going on a signed kick lately. I picked up a couple signed books, and I'm going to share these. I told you I had my collection on the eBays, and I'll probably be sharing some of these on the eBays. But I picked up a Beauty and the Beast #1, which was an innovation. Or they have an innovative comic book. I think it was Innovation, wasn't it? 1993, based off the television show that Ron Perlman and Linda, what's her name? Terminator chick. Evans?
No.
I
know who you're talking about.
Boy, what a brain fart.
Hold on. Terminator 2.
2 or 1. Married James Cameron for a while.
Yes.
As a twin. And the twin actually appeared in Terminator 2, which I didn't know about. It's funny how one twin
was Sarah Connor.
Shows Sarah Connor.
Yeah, I can see it's look, it's Sarah Connor, but who's the actress? Liz Hamilton.
Thank you. That's not the point. This particular one was signed by Mike Deodato Jr. and came with a certificate of authenticity. I also picked up a Black Orchid #5 from 1993, which is a series that Jill Thompson was doing the art for, or Thompson, I'm sorry, was doing the art for. And this one came with a notarized witness signature, which to me is as good as a certificate of authenticity. So, and although I have them in my sketchbook, as you know, if you listen to the sketchbook fill-ins we dropped, I don't know, they were cheap, they were inexpensive. The one thing I'm waiting on that I'm mildly freaking on, Cory, did you ever watch The Prisoner?
Yes.
Remember the car that Patrick McGowan drive, the Lotus 7?
Yes.
I picked up a model of that. I think it's one that somebody actually made versus one that was mass made. And it was shipped overseas, and it showed up in our customs, and it's been sitting there for over a week. And I have the tracking number, and I have eBay's thing that, yes, it made it to our customs, but nothing since. So I'm just kind of bummed. I've had that the other way around where when you ship things global, eBay global shipping, that it, we've shipped it. It's arrived overseas. It's been delivered. You get these 3 things. It was shipped. It made it. It's sitting in customs, and that's it. And I'm like, judging by the way the government moves and the way the post office moves, I don't know if I'll ever get this sumbitch. But I'm going to wait a month, and if I don't have it, I'll just send up a flag saying, hey, I didn't get it. I talked about the coffin book that I sold, the metal one. I just got my Hell Witch Little Risque Premier Edition from their Kickstarter. One thing I love about Coffin's Kickstarters is they always hit their stretch goals, and they always load it up with bonus items and extra comics, and you can get all your comics free, signed by Brian Paluto, which is kind of neat. What's weird about it is lately all their like really super premium stuff sells out fast. They have like this $3,000 get one of everything we've ever done collection, and by the time I hear about the Kickstarter, the 1 or 2 they've had is already sold, and it's just crazy. But it's kind of neat. I mean, I think it's kind of cool the way how these people have found their niche on Kickstarter. I remember when Archie tried Kickstarter and people bid him a new one?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they would do it now because there are some people, they're not in the previews. They only exist via Kickstarter. And once you get signed up with them, the next time they do another book, you just buy it through Kickstarter, which is kind of neat. So, but it's cool to see that people do that. It's cool to see that people survive via their art talent if they're able to do commissions and sketches. So if I can support you, I will. And we do it too. You know, Cory, somebody gets your attention and they will interview them and do a Kickstarter for them. So if you're doing a Kickstarter, drop us a line. We'll have you on the show and talk to you a little bit. I finally got a Christmas gift from my sister, because with COVID, we didn't really have a Christmas. She got me A People's History of American Empire, The American Empire Project by Howard Zinn, author of A People's History of the United States. Yeah, this is a graphic novel and with articles and stuff. And it's something I've always come across. I think, I'm not getting too far in this. If you want to go on my Facebook and talk to me, I think when they look back on history, this is the American Empire, because we're not doing like the Spanish and the British and the French where we go and colonize, and we basically just, hey, you either work with us or we'll overthrow you. Greece, I'm looking at you after World War II. South America, I'm looking at almost all of you. Sandinistas in the 80s, well, we needed jet so we could sell arms to Iran. But that was a different subject. We just used, what would they say, surrogates? It's all whatever. Anyways, my sister and I are on the same page on this, so she sent me this. And as I read through it, I'll talk about it. Cory, what do you think about dueling grandma's shortbread?
I think anytime grandmas want to fight, we need to put them in a cage.
Well, they're not fighting anymore, but if you go to duelinggrandmas.com, up in Forest Lake, this company, they make the best shortcake bread snacks I have ever had. And I heard about it from the Jason Show, and I thought, I'll give it a shot. It's a local business. I like to support local business, especially now that I knock on wood, and this is real wood because I ain't messing around, that it looks like we're on the good end of the tail end of the COVID stuff. Although I look back in history and remember, yeah, that lasted 1922 when the Spanish flu came to town. But if you go there, you can check out their stuff. I got the flagship combo box where they have the shortbread with chocolate and peanut butter and just the shortbread itself. And I'm not big on shortbread cookies because I'm a chocolate chip guy myself, but these were just amazing. So if you want to give it a shot, I don't know, they must mail, but they actually delivered it to our doorstep, and it was gift wrap and everything, and I had to hide it because, I got people here, they want to eat my shortbread. But yeah, they're up in White Lake. Again, www.duelinggrandmas.com, or Google it and they'll pop up. Give it a try. I think you'll enjoy it as much as I am. Other than that, I'm going to sit back and have one. Cory, what are you geeking on?
Joe, did you know that they were voting for the names of the 8 snowplows, the 8 new snowplows here in Minnesota?
I didn't.
We have the winners right here. The winners are going through the Metro District, Plowy McPlowface. And District 4, just going to plow right past you. In District 1, Duck Duck Orange Truck. District 2, Plow Bunyan. District 6, Snowby-Wan Kenobi. In District 7, F. Salt Fitzgerald. In District 3, Darth Blader. And in District number 8, the truck formerly known as Plow. I love our state.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Let's see. WandaVision only has 1 episode left.
Do I have to take my headphones off? I haven't even started it yet.
No, I'm just geeking on it. It's so good.
I got people every day. Like I talk to Eric Jackman Turbo every day. Did you watch it yet? No. I'm going to.
Here's the other thing that somebody put out a list between the TV series and the movies. If the movies come out, we will get a new Marvel thing every Friday for the rest of the year.
And not only that, but Coming to America is out this Friday.
So we're going to get a lot of new Marvel stuff after almost 2 years of no Marvel Cinematic Universe. They're going to load us up. What If starts this summer. I didn't realize that What If started this summer. Ms. Marvel is done filming. That will be coming by the end of the year, as will the Hawkeye series. Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Oh, they're bringing back MASH. That's good.
Yeah.
Side is pain. No, I don't want Johnny Mandel mad at me.
No. He's not the one who wrote it. It was. We've talked about that. It was Robert Altman's son wrote that song. He has made more money than anybody else who ever worked on MASH.
He was told, just write the worst song you can ever think of.
Yeah. And he made more money than anyone who's ever worked on MASH, including the guy who wrote the book. I thought maybe they were going to adapt all the books that, were so terrible.
As this podcast drops, we're only 2 weeks and 5 days to Godzilla versus King Kong.
Simon & Schuster announced that they have signed up a bunch of small press publishers to be doing their bookstore distribution.
Cool.
And Simon & Schuster has really kind of been signing up a lot of comic publishers because last year graphic novel sales were up 30%, the fastest growing category of comics. But comics are dead.
They are. I didn't even know they were sick.
Any time I see that now, it's just I don't even argue with people who say that. I just go, yeah, you don't know anything. Because every time a new Dogman book comes out, it sets world records. All of this, all of the young adult stuff. There's a reason why DC is going to be publishing 2 or 3 young adult books a month, because that's where the money is. That's why Marvel is doing the Masterworks in the smaller format for the Scholastic book fairs. Supply and demand, baby. There's a lot of demand. Speaking of demand, lots of comics selling out, by the way. Some of them, now what they mean by a book is selling out means it's no longer available from the distributor. You may still be able to get it at your comic shop, but when it sells out at the distributor level, they usually will go to a second print because they want to have enough books so that if a shop has some damages or does reorders, they can still ship them out. And usually they keep around 10%. But that 10% is selling out as people, get closer and closer to the day the book comes out. They're like, oh crap, more people are ordering this. I think the Spider-Man that ended the Kindred story, the one with the Patrick Gleason cover that's all webbing, they're going into a 3rd and 4th print of that. There's still that much demand for that book.
Probably based on the cover.
Well, and it is the end of a big story, and they have explained how Harry Osborn came back from the dead in One More Day, and why he's evil now. And because I was like, wait, didn't Harry Osborn? Why does he say he was in hell when he was alive? And it's, oh shit, Harry Osborn knows everything. Oh, and Mephisto is going to be showing up in Spider-Man, so they're definitely pulling at those threads. And we keep forgetting that One More Day was 15 years ago. How's that make you feel, Joe?
I'm not listening.
But anytime books are selling out, it's a good thing for the publishers and the comic industry, and even in a lot of ways for comic shops, because it means demand is going up. And I think that, as more people are getting vaccinated, as more things are opening up, people are excited to go to comic shops. I was reading on Twitter a bunch of comic creators who say that when they go to shops, there are a lot of shops who are like, we really don't want conventions to come back, because we're getting a lot of people coming in who don't normally come in, and they're buying up back issues, and they're buying up stuff from our dollar bins, and they're buying the extra stuff off the stands, because you've got all this pent-up demand. People who would go to conventions to get stuff, well, there haven't been conventions in a year or more, so they're going to shops. And I think a couple of the shops we went to last time we went geeking said the same thing. Oh, and San Diego's canceled, by the way.
Yep. Oh, San Diego for you.
Which doesn't surprise me. Like about 4 or 5 days before they announced it, Mark Evanier on his blog said, "Yeah, I'm recording a bunch of panels for WonderCon in San Diego." Maybe I shouldn't have said San Diego. And the last thing I am geeking on, the last few months at Marvel, they have made me sad, because I have not heard anything from anyone on if True Believers or the facsimile editions are coming back. And it reminds me of when they ended the Essential line. I would ask people, and there would be just dead silence. It's not that they would say they're ended, they just wouldn't answer. Now, when I asked about the Max line, what I was told was that line is dead unless Garth Ennis comes back and wants to do a Punisher story. So when they reprint Alias, which was the first Max book, it's not going to have the Max labeling. It'll just have the for mature readers only on it. So it looks like that line is pretty much gone, except for when Garth Ennis comes back and wants to, okay, we're going to have a lot of violence in this book.
Garth comes back the very next day.
But they are going through, and they are really going to town on reprinting the Epic and omnibuses, to the point where a lot of omnibuses you thought would never get reprinted are being reprinted, such as the Inferno, the Inferno Prelude for the X-Men, which previously was just published as a big, thick hardcover. Well, it's been rebranded as an omnibus, and it's getting reprinted. They're reprinting all the Spider-Man omnibuses before they do omnibus number 5. They've never gone to volume 5 on any omnibus line. Well, except the Ed Brubaker Captain America, but they didn't call that volume 5. They just each had a different name. But Marvel's saying, this is the first volume 5 we've done. It goes up through Spider-Man 180. If that don't make you feel old. But I'm seeing a lot of people who, I really want this Epic book, and it's going for $150 on eBay, and just wait. They're going to keep them in. They're going to keep them in print. I think there are a few omnibuses you're never going to see again. I don't think you're ever going to see the Devil Dinosaur omnibus again, because it was a really small one, and they've reprinted it as trade paperbacks and hardcovers. They probably just won't brand it as an omnibus this time. But Marvel is going through, they're keeping their stuff in print, whereas DC stuff goes out of print, boom, 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 boom.
Sayonara, sucker!
So I think you're going to see Marvel really pouring in a ton of money over the next year or two as they do this. And really the Epic line Because I like the Essential line. I'm not as big a fan of the Epic line, but I can see why people are, because it's, got the coloring in it. Myself, if I want a cheap trade paperback to read the early stuff, especially early Marvel, I like black and white because Ditko's art looks better in black and white. Most of Kirby's art looks better in black and white. But the people have spoken. Speaking of the people have spoken, we have spoken enough for this week.
True.
And as we say every week, the comic we like the least, we still like better than the comic that you like the most. Joe?
How about a history lesson?
Okay.
Lionel Smith, a railroad employee convicted of murder in 1926, they tried 2 attempts at the electric chair and failed. Why? He was a bad conductor.
I have a question, Joe.
You do?
Yeah, is he the guy that they named the Lionel toy trains after?
Well, he might have, with the third rail and all. Cory, hit my music.